views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Goes to Councilman Freistroffer. How would you vote when a city code conflicts with a neighborhood code?
Excellent question. I work with city codes quite often. I'm the representative for city council on the planning commission, and believe me, we have a lot of zoning codes. Basically, I think the city code's got to override the neighborhood association codes, but there's ways to work together. For example, on when we do the public hearings, we have public hearings, then we have a site committee which actually listens to the neighbors, it listens to the architects, it listens to the concerns that would fit that particular neighborhood. So then we, in a way, we amend that zoning. You can't amend it, but you can write a letter of commitment. And when that letter of commitment comes out, that is to protect the neighbors. For example, you may have a drive-through and the neighbors don't want to drive through. You might have too much lighting. You might have a disparity with height, with just basically zoning laws. So those are some, it's hard for me because if you jump through the proper hoops on zoning through the planning commission, you should get that zoning. But when you get to city council and you put that hat on, you have to listen to the neighbors. And believe me, I do listen to the neighbors, and there are times when, at that point, you almost have to vote against that particular zoning if it's not good for that neighborhood association and the neighbors. And the same thing would work for city code. As far as city code going out and looking at different things in neighborhoods, you know, I'm talking about the code enforcement. So that's what I basically work with is the city planning. Those are some examples where ultimately city code should override that association. But if the association goes after that, we have had lawsuits, and we're in a couple of lawsuits right now where the neighbors, you know, are in a lawsuit, maybe with the planning commission or the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Chambers.
The leader of all of these city departments and the money. So as a council person, we are the legislators. We create legislation to help to run the city. Although we can't add to the budget, we are able to cut the budget if we needed to. As well as we represent you, our constituents, the individuals who voted for us to be your council person. And although the mayor is the executor of the city, it is critical that as your councilwoman that I have a working relationship with the mayor. I meet with the mayor every other month so that he understands the messaging that I get from our constituents. I can share with him different opportunities that I want to bring to the city. So although he is the executor, he holds the purse strings to the city, it is important that we work together collectively so that we are working for the good of the order of the entire city.
Thank you very much. Candidate Gaudette.
So with abatement, trying to think, sorry. Brain's kind of frizzled, just a teeny bit. Is there any way, can I come back to that if possible, or?
I'm going to have to ask the, I think we can come back,
Okay.
but you can't use anything in between.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. And you can't call a friend.
Yeah.
Candidate Crandall. What measures will you take to ensure equitable representation and inclusion of BIPOC or Black, Indigenous people of color voices in decision-making processes within the city government?
That's really why I'm running. It's because I want to make sure that Fort Wayne is truly a city for all. We have such a diverse community here. So many stories. Each one of us has a different story. And we need to make sure that we are incorporating all of our experiences and all of our dreams so that we can be a stronger community. One of the things that I've done is be part of other tables representing the government. We need to make sure we're not just in Citizen Square. The city council might meet there, but there's nothing keeping us from going out to places all around the city to really have those conversations with our neighbors. I mean, that's what I've loved actually getting to be part of this campaign, is just getting to learn more about what's going on with the city and going to be places. What I've had the opportunity to do in my role is to be able to have conversations about what is impacting our neighbors of Black and brown. And I know infant mortality and maternal mortality are huge issues in the 03 and the 06. The city council may not be the ones that govern the health department, but we have to start talking about our social determinants of health and how city policy can actually impact those effects. Because we know our housing policies, our health issues, so many of them are unfortunately tied to our zip code where we live. To me, it's unconscionable that a child who grows up in Southeast has a life expectancy that's 20 years less than a child who grows up in Southwest. We have to do more, and we have to make sure that we're talking with our neighbors about what are the challenges that we need to address. I've been part of the Women's Fund, and something that we've done is made sure that our research reflects the differences of what's happening to white women and what's happening to women of color. And we unfortunately know that women already have a pay gap of $16,000 about between our male counterparts. And it's even worse for the women of color. We have to make sure that we are actually finding out what are the issues, how we can work with the mayor's office, how we can work with the entire community to bring together not just the government, but our faith institutions, our nonprofit organizations, our businesses, to really issue ideas and work on change. Because that's what's so great about Fort Wayne, is that we have this diverse community, but we're still a small town feel, where we can all come together and really get to know our neighbors. And I know that we are all losing out when our children don't have an opportunity to thrive. And that's what I want to make sure that we really focus on. What's the city we're building for each of our children? So that each one of them has opportunity. Because if they're not living their best life, we're all losing out. So we need to hear everybody's voice at the table. We need to make sure that city council is going to every part of the city to really have those conversations and make sure that everyone feels like they have a voice, no matter where they live.
Thank you very much. Candidate Freeze, what specific legislation or policies do you plan to implement that would address the unique challenges faced by BIPOC communities in the area?
Thank you. First of all, thank you everyone for coming out. I think it's important that we maintain the goal to have a common good in our city. Not only is it the job of the government to protect all of its people, it's the job of the government to maintain and establish a common good, which by definition is for the benefit and interest of everyone, all 270,000 people in Fort Wayne. And there are two things that make a common good, and it's non-excludability and it's non-rival consumption. So having the ability to do whatever you need to do within the public domain and not impede on other people with that common good. So as far as instituting legislation, it's really important that we all work together to institute the legislation that would be best suited for each neighborhood and everyone all together.
Thank you very much. I have a question for you. Are there any specific programs or initiatives you are considering to attract and retain young professionals in Fort Wayne?
I think that the biggest thing that we have been missing out on in terms of attracting and retaining young people in Fort Wayne is creating a culture where everyone feels that they belong and that their experiences are at the center point of how we make decisions in the $190 million that we pass as a budget every year, and the departments that we assign boards and commission members to, in some of the big decisions that neighborhoods make and the zoning building make. When I see, as a community organizer for 10 years, my job was to go around the city and create teams of everyday working class people that were going to be able to read a city budget and understand the various levels of power in a city and in a county and in a state, and understand how to work on the issues that were addressing them. And you know, when I see young people coming fresh out of high school, maybe even still in high school, and maybe also young in college, or not going to college, right? Working in one of our retail and service jobs. When I see them take valuable time away from their family or from their commitments and come to something to do with government, only to be kind of listened to and nodded at, but then really quickly eschewed away and a decision to be made that didn't represent any of the concerns that they raised, that's one of the most heartbreaking moments as somebody who cares about developing leaders in public life. So I think that we would have to really prioritize how we create a panel within the city council that has reporting power on a regular basis, that is able to talk about the status of young people and also the status of their neighborhoods, their families, and their communities.
Thank you very much, and again, I apologize for moving past you earlier. Councilman Freshoff, can you outline any current or proposed initiatives aimed at improving access to resources, funding, and mentorship opportunities for entrepreneurs in Fort Wayne?
Well, we just created Electric Works. They have an incubator area in there for people that come in for entrepreneurs. We always have, quite frequently, we have businesses that come to City Council on abatements, and I think that was a question, or you give them tax incentives for them to hire people in their companies, for them to buy new equipment, expand on their buildings, etc. And a lot of times the question I ask is, where are you hiring these? And sometimes are you hiring young people? That's a good chance for our businesses to hire young people. Another way is to support businesses in entrepreneurship with the colleges. The colleges and the business, should have a connection there, a connection where you can bring in for certain students in for certain trades. I'm a business person. I've probably trained 15 to 20 appraisers in town. I say this humbly, more than any appraiser that we've had. So we've got to promote entrepreneurship within our businesses, and at the same time support these businesses that come to City Council when they look for abatements, when they look for the TIF areas that they're working through, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of ways that we can actually support that at City Council. It just depends on where the issue is.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Chambers, how will you engage with and seek input from residents in economically depressed areas of Fort Wayne to ensure their perspectives and concerns are heard and addressed in the decision-making process?
Great question. What I've been doing for the last 4 years is being involved in all of the communities in Fort Wayne, attending neighborhood meetings, partnership meetings, sitting down and listening with our faith leaders. If you're not engaging with the community, how can you help the community? This is supposed to be a part-time position, but it is a full-time effort. You really have to have a good handle on what the needs are of the community. And that's what I pride myself on, being very accessible. I have a hashtag Stay Informed. I take great pride in my social media presence because I am always educating and informing our community about what's going on in the city. And also letting the constituents know that you have the power. You have the power, so we need you to be engaged and working with us. So you have to be a part of the community that you live in, you work in. My family lives here Southeast, so I'm always Southeast. So being engaged, attending, listening, learning, and being active in meeting the needs of our constituents.
Thank you very much. Tell us a recent experience you have had on the south side of Fort Wayne, other than a political event or media announcement.
So I I lived part of my life, a majority of my life, on Berry Street, right downtown. So I grew up in this area. I biked the area. I have a lot of friends who lived on the south side, so biking through there. I think that it's important to make a community, because, sorry, let me come back. I grew up on Berry Street, right behind the daycare and church on Wells Street. Yeah, that kind of area. So biking to friend's house, I've visited a lot of restaurants and stores on the south side. I think a problem for me personally is like going to any stores or anything, it's been really difficult to have access to any of that, because no matter, from living where I was, it was always I have to drive up north to Glenbrook area, or I'd have to drive all the way out to Jefferson Point. It was never going down, had to drive or I was going all the way out to Southtown, and I think that was a big issue for me personally. But yeah, I grew up on this side of town, talking to people, just going to parks on South Side and everything else.
Thank you. So, how would you vote when a city code conflicts with a neighborhood code?
So this question was really interesting to me. I'm actually a public finance attorney in a previous life, and so that's sort of the idea of what law supersedes another one. And so I assume that the question was really about, when we have covenants in our neighborhoods, ideas that when we move into our neighborhoods, we think that everybody's going to abide by. Well, there's actually a bit of a hierarchy of law. But there's still, going back to what Councilman Freistrater said, there's a question about what do we want our city code to actually say? What part of it do we want it to actually govern our community? Do we want it to be the neighborhood level? Do we need it to be what happens across the city? And really, there's a lot of issues that happen at city council where the answer may not be city council. It's important to have city council members who can also talk to our elected officials on the state and federal levels if that's the question that we're really trying to get at. And that's definitely the experience I bring, having worked for the city for the last 10 years, and being that voice and working with our elected officials to help them understand how the policy decisions that they're making and the laws that they're creating impact how we provide services in Fort Wayne. Some of our city code and the neighborhood covenants as well go back to what state law either allows us to do or doesn't allow us to do. And so when we're really talking about what do we want to be and what laws make sense, we need to have people at the table who understand how all of those laws work together. That is absolutely what I will bring to the table, is my experience of having advocated for residents throughout Fort Wayne on what do they want their neighborhoods to be, what do they want their relationships to be. There's actually a really cool program that I learned about in Bellevue, Washington, that was about conflict resolution for neighborhoods. I mean, if that's what we're talking about, if we're really talking about when our neighborhood code maybe doesn't make sense, and maybe it's some kind of dispute between neighbors, let's think about what are some other cities doing that we might be able to try here, because Fort Wayne can be an example for a lot of solutions. Our whole history is innovation. We have so much talent here in Fort Wayne. And so if we want to talk about the difference between city code and neighborhood code, let's really talk about what community we want to build and what are the policies that we need to have in place to be able to make that vision happen.
Thank you very much. Candidate Freeze. Are there any specific programs or initiatives you are considering to attract and retain young professionals in Fort Wayne?
Yeah, again, thank you for the opportunity to answer. I really like the initiatives that Greater Fort Wayne works with, PFW as well, on young leaders in the community. And I also think that there's a lot to do with what draws youth to a community. Have it a safe community, an area to raise a family in. That's what really kept my wife and I here. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, but after I finished my stint at Ball State University, my wife and I had to decide where we were going to raise our family. And Fort Wayne is a great area. It's safe. A lot of good jobs. There are even more good jobs down the road. And down the road time-wise, and it's an outstanding area. And keeping the cost of living reasonable is also very important to draw youth and keep youth here.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Candidate Davis. What measures would you take to ensure equitable representation and inclusion of BIPOC voices in decision-making processes within city government?
So one of the defining moments of my life was right after George Floyd's murder, when the whole nation erupted in outcry for justice. And I'll never forget when former Councilman Pape wrote a letter to the editor pointing out the lack of diversity that was currently in city government and in our boards and our commissions. And one of the saddest parts to see a response to that being, well, very few people are stepping up. I don't think that that's the case. I think that in order for us to be able to develop the leadership that's going to be needed for, like, for example, what Michelle Chambers recently accomplished on the city council to put term limits on our commissions and our boards that are appointed by the council, in order for us to begin to form the talent that's going to be able to be the next level of those leaders that can take the next term after those people age out or term out, we have a responsibility in Fort Wayne to create hubs of public life development. So that means like utilizing all of the people that we would usually get together to address an epidemic or to address some kind of a public health crisis, and instead make it about the crisis of people not having access and understanding and feeling themselves represented in their local government. It's actually for our betterment that we do this now rather than wait for somebody else to do it, like Barack says, and also rather than wait for some state program or national program. Our voter engagement levels have dropped pretty much exponentially across the last 4 terms. And if we can begin to help coaches and educators and small business owners have a part of their formation that the city funds, where they can be taught how to talk to young people, how to talk to Burmese people, have translators available to neighborhood associations that aren't going to cost them money, but that the city provides the ability to use. These are all ways that we can start to build more and more ownership and representation from communities of color and those who are most marginalized.
Thank you very much. Let's give all of our candidates a round of that you have provided for them. And I'm just thankful that you were here tonight and glad that you were willing to take this challenge on and the challenge of running. So we appreciate you and thank you for being here.
My name is Ethan Gaudet. I'm running for Fort Wayne City Council at large.
Okay, what are you going to do with the city council at large?
So for my city council at large, I want to be that voice for my generation who often goes unheard. There's only the people on city council are it's not varied within the age group necessarily. A lot of them are on the older side. There's nothing wrong with that, but I believe that I can bring you a unique perspective with my campaign. I'm 20 years old, and I hope that at least with my campaign I can inspire more youth to get involved.
And it goes to candidate Williams. How will the city of Fort Wayne be better under your leadership as clerk?
Glad you asked. My name is Horsh Williams and I'm running for Fort Wayne City Clerk. I have 16 years local government experience. I want to rebuild the relationship between the clerk's office and the mayor's office. I want to work on community involvement and engagement.
Question that goes to candidate Keesley. What benefit is it to the city of Fort Wayne for there to be an elected city clerk?
Oh, great question. Thank you for the question. I am Lena Keesling. I have served as the city clerk for the last 8 years. It's been my honor to serve as the city clerk. The city clerk actually is a statutory position with the state. So just like you have the mayors elected, you have 9 councilmen that are elected, you have to have the city clerk. And so the city clerk is kind of the third leg of the government for the municipal government. And the biggest challenge, or the biggest advantage to having that city clerk is the process of pulling through all of the ordinances within the city. So if the mayor's office, for example, or the council office was responsible for those ordinances, we have ordinances that come down, by the way, from either the administration, the law office for the administration from the mayor's office, and we have ordinances that come from the council for city council. And so, as you know, sometimes the mayor might advocate for some ordinances, council may not. So you have people who are for and against it. If you didn't have a third party, the city clerk, who was the one responsible for putting that on an agenda, things may not go and flow through the process accurately or adequately or transparently. So I can tell you what happens is we get ordinances from both sides. We get those by Friday at noon. They go on the agenda, and that agenda, they get introduced the following Tuesday. They get discussed and passed the following next two Tuesdays. And so it's a clear process. If you didn't have an independent source that didn't have anything to do with either one of those, you may have someone who decides they don't want to put something on an agenda, or they want to hold something and not and wait till a further date, or they don't want something discussed with other ordinances. Or you can also play the game of who's sitting at the table when something gets voted on. Is there a council member that won't be there? So you're going to lose a vote either for or against, and so you play with the vote count that's happening at the table. I can assure you under my administration over the last 8 years, it doesn't happen. We don't look at who's sitting at that table, what the votes are going to be before it goes. If it comes down, we have a clear, transparent process for everything that goes through the council process and the legal process within the city. And it's been my honor to serve as your city clerk the last 8 years.
Thank you. Candidate Williams, are there any specific programs or initiatives you are considering to attract and retain young professionals in Fort Wayne?
Yes, being involved in the youth in Fort Wayne. There's different educational programs, different forums that we can bring people in to council, into the meetings, just different things that we want to inform individuals about. There's a lot that goes on with the city clerk's office, with the city council's office. We want to make sure that everyone has the knowledge of what's going on. Also, I would like to bring technology and access. Over the past decade, there's a lot of things that we can upgrade, and it's time that we get those things done. We want to, there's a timekeeper on the wall. You get 2 minutes. All we have to do, you have to look at it, and you can see your time's up. So there's little things that we can do, website, so on, but let's work on technology also.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Candidate Kiesling, tell us of a recent experience you have had on the south side of Fort Wayne that is not a political activity or media event.
That's an easy question for me to answer. First, I'll tell you that since I have been here, I actually moved here as a young professional in 1988 to invest in a business. So I was one of those transplants into Fort Wayne because I think Fort Wayne's a great community and it's a place I wanted to live and to raise my family. But the gentleman that does my hair is on the south side, and he has done my hair for 35 years. He's just recently retiring, and I'm looking for somebody else. But I often go to businesses in the southeast part of Fort Wayne, and I love it. Wouldn't change that. And I also sit on, very blessed to be a part of the League for the Blind and Disabled. As many of you might know, I've been very passionate about disability rights and things having to do with that. And the League, and we have the executive director here, we have some employees, and we have some board members here for the League. And it has been my honor to serve on that. I am just recently this week was actually voted the chair of that board again for the 3rd term. And I sit on the executive committee, the finance committee, and also the governance committee. And they serve the southeast part of Fort Wayne for those with disabilities and needs. And they started in southeast Fort Wayne and want to remain in southeast Fort Wayne. Even though they do provide services in all of northeast Indiana, they have a lot of consumers in this part of the state or this part of the city. And so they will remain there, as we do a new capital campaign because we've outgrown the building that we're in. We want to make sure we stay in Southeast Fort Wayne so that we still are close to those that we serve in this community. So many things that I do, and I'm proud of what I do in the disability rights. When I started as city clerk, working with parking issues for those with disabilities. Actually, I think in 2016, I did a project with Nelson Peters, Commissioner Peters, to enhance parking on street, and we more than doubled the parking spaces on street, and that is what got me involved with disability rights and the programs that the League provides, and they do great work. I know the question earlier was something about having to do with services for those with disabilities, and I can tell you that the League provides great services to this community, and we have a lot of consumers. While they are expanding all the time, I believe they do a phenomenal job, and we are very lucky as a community to have League for the Blind here. Thank you.
What's your name?
Betsy Kochmar, BETSYKACHMAR, and I'm the president of the Fort Wayne League of Women Voters.
I asked you earlier what was the 411 program?
We have, this is a national program that the League of Women Voters has done, and it gives us an opportunity to ask questions of the candidates, and they put their information, their answers on the website directly, so it's their words, whatever they want to say to the questions we've asked, and then you can do a side-by-side comparison of all the candidates that'll be on your ballot, and you can even select the one that you prefer, print it out, or send it to your phone, take it with you when you go vote, so that when you were doing your homework, you could remember who you wanted to vote for, and you could vote smart.
And thank you so much.
You're welcome.